Welcome to Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today, it is my honor to have Aimée Lindenberger with me.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in zone. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests, the podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Aimée founded Refocus Fundraising in 2017 and recently joined Global Philanthropic Canada as a senior consultant. With over 20 years of marketing and communication experience and being one of the first in the world to earn a certificate in Philanthropic Psychology, she brings innovative approaches to charities across Canada, helping them engage supporters more deeply, especially in legacy giving, which is her passion. She's assisted many organizations in raising more money, including United Way BC, Plan International Canada, Heart and Stroke Foundation, WWF Canada, and the Salvation Army. Aimée is the author of How to Talk About Legacy Giving and regularly contributes to the sector as a speaker and teacher. She's held leadership roles in the Greater Vancouver Chapters, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, and the Association of Fundraising Professionals. So, welcome, Aimée. It's interesting you talk about how taxes obviously aren't a motivator, but, I've spent so much time in the legacy giving that if, there's an estate that has, the bank stocks that this couple has held on to since day one, it's split 1,000 different times and it has huge appreciated securities. If it's just left in the estate, they're getting nailed on the tax on the gains, where they could actually make a gift, which actually could provide more net income to the estate at the end of the day by donating than it would by not donating.
Yeah, there are certainly those high gift values that make that. When we're talking about the average donor who's leaving a $50,000 gift or something, then it's not usually the main reason they're doing it. So for the average donor, it's not the main concern. But for sure, there are those times where the tax considerations are absolutely.
Yeah. And it's funny. I've been an executive for a handful of estates. And as a fundraiser, kind of the tricks of the trade, right? Whereas some folks just do things out of ease. So Mr. and Mrs. Smith pass away. The first thing they do is liquidate all the assets, and then they start dispersing. But sometimes they trigger tax implications by liquidating them all first, which, is kind of a disservice. But it winds up taking much longer, and, the average estate now is open for 2 or 3 years. It's such a slow, laborious process.
Yeah, there are so many lay executors who, choosing a lay executor is a lot of work, a lot more work than I think most people who say yes know that they're in for. And so, choosing someone who knows what they're doing or a professional is often kinder to your loved ones than choosing someone
Definitely. So I'm sure you've been in the fundraising business for decades now, as have I, and people call me up all the time and ask me to go for a coffee or an adult beverage, who are thinking about joining our noble profession. And so what do you tell these folks that are coming in as potential new fundraisers?
I think one of the things that I tell people is that, there's an idea that you have to be a really outgoing extrovert, that you have to be really knowing everything there is to know about all of these gift types, especially if they're interested in legacy giving. And it's not necessarily true. You can start from scratch. You can start and work your way up. And there's room for people. I'm not an extrovert. I'm an introvert. I like writing more than I like in-person talking. And there's room for everyone. You know, there's room for all sorts of skill sets. There's room for people who are super organized and diligent and are filling in, you know, donor records and keeping track of everything meticulously. People who are great at writing and communications and developing perfect asks and grant writing. And, you know, you find your niche. And so, you know, if you're interested in making the world a better place, there's room for you in fundraising. So, absolutely.
Wow. That was well put. So I at least always learn a little something from every donor interaction that I have had in my life. I always walk away with just maybe it's a different view on something I hadn't considered, or whatever it may be. But tell me something that you've learned from a donor.
I think one of the lessons I've learned from a donor is that, well, actually one comes to mind that's kind of funny, which is that we have to be far more specific than we think when we're talking about planned giving or legacy giving, which is that one time with a story I heard was an organization had been talking, an animal organization had been talking to a donor for months about a planned gift. And they both thought they were talking about the same thing and talking sort of in vague terms. And then eventually the legacy officer talked more specifically and said, you know, do you mind telling me a bit more about your gift? And the woman said, well, you know, it's my cat, Misty. And she thought she was making arrangements for after her passing that the animal organization would be taking her cat. She was making arrangements for after her death. And of course, the organization thought that they were talking about a monetary gift. And so I think one of the things that, you know, you mentioned that oftentimes people think fundraisers are party planners. And I think oftentimes, you know, especially with an organization called the Canadian Association of Gift Planners, you know, there's lots of confusion about when we say that. Oh, so you're planning gifts, you do gift bundles, you do sort of gift wrapping, or what do you do? And so I think, you know, we have to be more explicit about what we're talking about sometimes. And so I think we do a disservice to ourselves and sometimes donors. And so that's definitely one thing that this donor, you know, it wasn't me, I wasn't the legacy officer in that case, but that donor definitely taught all of us a lesson with that one, that we have to just be a little more clear with what we're talking about.
100%. You kind of hit on one of my pet peeves about our industries. We use this jargon that no one else uses. I hate the phrase planned giving. I think any meaningful gift is a planned gift, because the opposite of that is an impulse gift. So I think it's the wrong term, right? But we're so afraid to talk about legacy or fundraising or something that we come up with all of these other adjectives or pronouns to use so that we can soft pedal what it is that we're actually requesting. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves and the donors at the same time by doing that.
Well, and I've even heard some donors complain a little bit about calling things just a gift instead of just a donation. We're asking for a donation.
Right.
And a gift it's a nice way to say it, but you know, it is a donation.
It's funny. One of our the people who I've had on this podcast are people from the UK and Australia, and when I talk to them about some of the the questions I'm going to ask, I say, you know, what was your best canvas? And they said, I have no idea what that word means. And I don't use the word solicitation because for better or for worse, all I think of are hookers when people say solicitation. So I just use either ask or canvas, but it's certainly not what the majority of people around the world use. So, you know, I've come to learn words are pretty important. Yeah. Well, Aimée, this has been absolutely amazing. I'm so glad we had the opportunity to chat.
Great.
If folks wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
One of the easiest ways is to look for me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Aimée Lindenberger in the world, as far as I know. So Aimée, spelled as you see it on the screen, Aimée Lindenberger, on LinkedIn, or you can reach me at Aimée@refocusfundraising.com. And I'm happy to have people reach out anytime. I love to talk legacy giving or any questions anyone has.
Well, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.